Okay, go ahead and find this vaping student pace pair deck. I'll go through the different slides with you. Hopefully I can teach you something new about this increasing trend among just people in general and give you some more information about it. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is a graph from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, of the percent of the population that is greater than or equal to 18 years old by gender. So as you guys can see, the percentage of Americans who smoke is going down. And so big tobacco companies don't like this decreasing trend, so they're going to target mainly the youth, and they're going to try to keep their business from totally flatlining in sales. And so they're going to have to be strategic on how they're going to keep revenue coming in. And so we're going to see history repeating itself in terms of their marketing strategies. And this will tie into vaping momentarily. So in this video, it starts off a bit dry. It goes into some history of tobacco, etc., but focus on what happened in the 80s with the marketing strategy of big tobacco companies.
Listen to see how big tobacco companies have always targeted the youth.
European settlers discovered tobacco from the indigenous Americans. They quickly fall in love with the buzz of smoking tobacco and get addicted. Tobacco becomes a cash crop and massive industry. As with any massive agricultural industry in the US, comes the need for labor. In this case, forced labor via African slavery. Mid-1700s. In 1760 in New Jersey, Pierre Lorillard starts the first company that processes and manufactures tobacco. The company continues to profit from slave labor. Early 1900s. Fast forward to 1901. Many Americans are addicted to tobacco, and 3.5 billion cigarettes are sold in a single year. Lots more tobacco companies are being formed to keep up with all the demand. Mid-1900s. For at least 20 years, cigarettes are marketed as being good for you, and most of the public accepts that to be true. Tobacco companies market them to consumers for help with a cough. Even doctors recommend smoking. 1964. Smoking is at an all-time high. 42% of Americans are smokers. The U.S. Surgeon General releases a report explaining how smoking can lead to lung cancer and other deadly diseases. Because cigarettes contain nicotine, even people who want to quit have a hard time doing so. Tobacco companies already know that nicotine is addictive. It's what keeps them in business.
Interesting.
1978. Cancer is described as an essential ingredient of life by one tobacco company. Oxygen is an essential ingredient of life, not cancer. 1984. Because there are smokers who die every year from tobacco-related diseases, a tobacco company decides to focus on marketing to replacement smokers, younger adult smokers. 1985. 20 years after the Surgeon General's report, lung cancer is the #1 cause of cancer deaths in America. And what's most likely to give you lung cancer? Cigarettes. 1990s to 2000s. Millions of people still smoke, but the government regulates the sale of tobacco. Effective treatments have come onto the market to help people quit smoking, including patches and medication. Overall, smoking is declining, sometimes by over 5% in a single year. 2007 to 2008. The first mass-market vaping devices are imported to the US. They're marketed to help people who smoke cigarettes quit, even though there's no research to support that claim. Within a year, the World Health Organization warns people that vaping has the potential to get you more addicted to nicotine, not less. But public perception already sees vaping as a healthier alternative to smoking cigarettes, mainly because there isn't a whole lot of information to disprove that assumption. And tobacco companies see vaping as their opportunity to grow their businesses. Today, big tobacco companies have a majority stake in the vaping industry, continuing to profit off addiction. And who are they targeting? They're looking right at you with dollar signs in their eyes.
Okay, as you guys can see, in the 80s, they are targeting youth as their replacement smokers. In my opinion, I think they're doing that again with vaping. And I think some strong evidence for that is...
Listen to see how big tobacco companies have always targeted the youth.
I'm sorry. Some evidence for that is that big tobacco companies have a majority stake in vaping companies. So in my opinion, that's concerning. Go ahead and write if you feel that's concerning or not, or if you just think, why wouldn't they not be invested into it? It's a big moneymaker for them. Okay, so you can pause and answer that question at this point. Do you feel it's concerning that they have a majority stake in these companies, big tobacco, when people are thinking, oh, it's just vaping, it's not related to cigarettes?
Listen to see how big tobacco companies have always targeted the.
Okay, so teenage e-cig users are replacement smokers. In your opinion, yes, no, maybe. So go ahead and put a check mark there. If current Laguna Beach High School students that are e-cig users are potential smokers in the future. Explain what you mean if you put yes or no or maybe. Okay, why do you believe that to be true? And I guess we don't even know yet. In my opinion, they are being groomed to be smokers. That doesn't mean that they will for sure be. We don't have enough data to support that yet, but we will in the future. Okay. So this is something that's a little bit harrowing. Nicotine is really addictive, and you guys already know that. Almost as hard as meth and heroin. So it's up there. It's just socially accepted, you guys, and it kills people. People that are smokers, though, can still function in society compared to maybe a heroin addict or a meth user, but it's still really, really damaging for someone's body. And then again, technically the only two things that we're addicted to would be serotonin and dopamine. So let's just take a second to focus on the synapse. We've seen these pictures before. So go ahead and just study this picture and circle the actual molecule of nicotine. Where is it lodging in this image? I'm gonna find it and circle it. Okay. All you're doing is circling nicotine. All right, next question. If you had to guess based off of this picture, what do you think nicotine does to neurons? I'm not sure if I need to pause right now. I'm sure you can just pause it as well. What do you think it's doing when the nicotine binds to that receptor? All right. Nicotine tricks the nerve cell into sending a message to release more dopamine into the synapse. And so the person who's using the nicotine will then just get that feel-good dopamine high that other drug users get as well. So it's just that uptick in dopamine that nicotine and e-cig and cigarette users are addicted to. People say it's just vapor. I threw in an office choke. That's not necessarily true. So sometimes people like to compare it to a nebulizer or an inhaler. I'm like, if those are medical grade, why can't I use this device? It's the exact same thing. It is vapor. So if you don't know what a nebulizer is, it's used to treat respiratory conditions like asthma, or it can be used for pneumonia. It turns liquid medicine into aerosol droplets so the person can breathe it in more easily. So it's just a way to intake liquid medicine. Okay, so these two images are going to be medical grade nebulizers. And I want you to focus on one specific part of a nebulizer that is specific to the nebulizer only and not to e-cigarettes at all, which is also going to take a liquid, a juice particle, and make it into vapor, similar to this medical device. But there's a big difference here. So here's the baffle, here, okay? This is for two medical grade nebulizers that people are trying to say that e-cigs are comparable to. All right, look at the size of the molecules going through the baffle holes. What do you believe the role of the baffle is in these nebulizers? All right. You should be saying something about how they keep larger aerosol molecules from exiting into the person's mouth. So it's just a size filtration system. It keeps the large molecules out. Do you think e-cigarettes have a baffle? Well, look at a jewel pod. It has the cover, outer shell, it has the coil, the gold-plated contact, the chimney, the rubber gasket, and the mouthpiece. Okay, so there's no baffle in this unit. So I kind of told you the answer, sorry. So there is no size restriction on the size of the aerosol vapor that's entering the user's lungs. There's no restriction, there's no baffle. That's the biggest difference between that and a medical grade user. So compared to a medical grade nebulizer, e-cigarette vapor particle sizes are ... bigger. Like, well, who cares? Good question. All right, here we go. Underline the key points. The massive influx of particles into the lungs pulls water into your lungs, causing a drowning effect. Your immune system attacks the inhaled particles because it looks like an infection or a toxin. All right, so you have an influx of these particles into your lungs, then we're gonna have a drowning effect. Your body's gonna respond like these massive aerosols are going to be a germ that is going to attack in similar ways that we see with pneumonia or other pollutants in your lungs. So this is the drowning effect. You have the accumulation of fluid in your air sacs, which, as you know, only can have air in them to function properly. It's similar to pneumonia. All right, so look at this check box, right? This is good. All right, so black is good, just FYI, black in lungs. We see a lot of rich blackness in there. After vaping in large particles, this is what the lungs would look like. So you have the large droplets from the vape are pulling water into the lungs, causing this drowning effect. The cloudiness is the water vapor and the white blood cells that are attacking what seems to be these foreign bodies when essentially they're just large vapor molecules. So why do you think there's white blood cells flooding into the lungs? Remember, the white blood cells are the army of your body, and they kill all invading germs, viruses, bacteria, parasites, funguses in your body. All right. All right, let's go ahead and interpret this graph. This one's kind of hard to read. So you have the month of the year, January through August, so it looks like the first 8 months of the year. And this is going to be emergency department visits or ER visits for severe unexplained respiratory illnesses. Severe unexplained respiratory illnesses. So we're seeing some upticks. We're seeing some upticks in these unexplained respiratory illnesses in emergency rooms. Looks like we have a pretty strong uptick in 2019 for males here. Okay. So let's explain why. Go ahead and just look at this picture of the lungs. Go ahead and circle the bronchioles. We're now going to explain why we're getting these respiratory illnesses. We talked about the drowning effect. Now let's talk about another condition that can happen from vaping. Okay, the bronchiole. Bronchioles end in ... What is the name of that term for the air sacs? Also right here where my cursor is. If someone has bronchiolitis obliterans, what would be wrong with their bronchial tubes, and what would be the result of this condition? All right, we know what bronchiolitis is. It's the inflammation of the bronchioles. It's just like a really severe bronchitis, but obliterans means to obliterate the bronchiole that is inflamed. Obliterate means to kill, nuke, destroy, okay? So here you have a normal open bronchiole. Over here you have bronchiolitis, severe inflammation. Okay, so what causes bronchiolitis obliterans? Well, it's something called diacetyl. Diacetyl is a chemical that's used in a lot of vape pods that give it that flavor that they have. It's not safe to breathe in. Okay, so it's called popcorn lung, and it kind of has an interesting history. So they use the same diacetyl. You're like, well, my vapes don't taste like popcorn. No, it doesn't. It's a different chemical that they use in popcorn as well as in vapes. But these factory workers for popcorn companies were breathing in diacetyl in popcorn factories. And years later, they were treated for these severe lung infection cases. So they have popcorn lung because they worked in the popcorn factory and were breathing in diacetyl, and they caused their bronchioles to get inflamed. And we're going to see that exact same concept happening, but with e-cigarette users. So diacetyl is in the liquid microwavable popcorn, but it's also in e-juices and e-liquids as well. All right, so many of the liquids contain diacetyl, which can lead to popcorn lung, and that's irreversible lung damage. So it doesn't have to taste like popcorn. I already went over that, but diacetyl is a main ingredient in these pods. Okay, let's watch a testimonial here.
For months, health officials in the U.S. have been searching for answers, trying to understand the cause of an outbreak of vaping-related illnesses that led to the death of 28-year-old Kyle Boyd.
He had no thoughts of harming himself. He just didn't know how dangerous this was.
While Canada has not yet seen any vaping-related deaths, doctors in London, Ontario say earlier this year a teenage boy came very close.
He was as critically ill as you can get.
He began using e-cigarettes just 5 months before becoming ill. He used them a lot, inhaling flavored e-liquids and THC from pods he purchased online. His symptoms began with a persistent cough, but doctors soon realized how serious his condition was. The teen spent 47 days on life support and nearly required a double lung transplant.
We've been seeing him in follow-up, and his breathing tests are still showing that he has significant lung impairment, similar to someone who has smoked for years and years.
But in research published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, the teen's doctors have revealed his case is very different than so many across the U.S. Those previously documented cases have involved damage to the sponge-like tissues of the lungs, known as alveoli. But the London teenager had inflammation through the small tubes that surround the lungs instead. These tubes became so inflamed, carbon dioxide couldn't escape and built to toxic levels inside his body.
It really illustrates that e-cigarettes are now being linked to not just one type of lung disease, but a diversity of lung disease, and in this case, a chronic lung illness that's going to affect this young man now for the indefinite future.
Stanbrook blames government inaction for this illness. He says while some provinces have moved to implement restrictions, what's needed are tougher rules Canada-wide.
From my perspective, I'll be speaking with stakeholders, I'll be speaking with my colleagues about what stronger actions we can take to protect young people from the effects of vaping, but also the effects of advertising.
Doctors involved in the London case say they hope the teen's brush with death will serve as a grave warning for others. Heather Yurex, West Global News, Calgary.
All right.
4 months.
All right, so go ahead and just type in, based off of the past few minutes, what is popcorn lung? So go ahead and pause this or continue to type as this video rolls. So it's not just vapor, okay? It has diacetyl in it. It's pulling water into your lungs. You also have the vape coils that the vapor is going to rub against, and that's going to emit these small metals or these heavy metals into the vapor. It's kind of comparable to the BPAs that you get when you leave your plastic water bottles out and you have water and you drink it after a hot day. You have that leaching of those chemicals into the water. It's a similar concept, but it's the coils and the vapor in this case, okay? So you have lead. Let's go ahead and circle the negative impacts of lead. Lead is a chemical that's a lot safer than most metals. So it was once used to make pipes, paints, and more, but they don't use it for pipes or paints anymore because it's poisonous. There are massive amounts of regulation that come with renovating a house with lead paint because inhaling lead paint is toxic. And lead has been known to be found in vape juice. Lead exposure can lead to nerve damage and issues with your digestive system and possibly death. I know that is extreme, but lead in the juice and lead in the coils is very dangerous. Propylene glycol becomes converted to vapor. What does it become? Circle what it becomes when it's converted to vapor. Propylene glycol is a synthetic liquid substance that absorbs water. It's another of the most common ingredients science have found in vape juice. It's not just harmful by itself, but when you heat it up in a vape device, it becomes formaldehyde, a carcinogen, which is a cancer causer. If formaldehyde sounds similar, it's because it's a substance that they use to preserve dead people. Okay, so propylene glycol, when you change its state of matter when it vaporizes and it becomes the chemical formaldehyde. 1 Juul cartridge is equal to the nicotine in 1 pack of cigarettes. It's a lot of nicotine. I think that's pretty strong evidence that nicotine is backing Juul so much financially, because eventually people are going to move on to assumed harder nicotine delivery systems in terms of cigarettes. E-cigs should be sold in convenience stores. Think about this. Do you think they should be? Yes, no, or maybe? Just pick one. Should they be sold in a convenience store? Well, you might be thinking, why would anyone put yes? Well, here's some arguments for yes. We have to accept some addiction to something that cannot kill you, is what someone is saying. You have 500,000 smokers dying from cigarette smoke, not nicotine. Okay, that's a thought. It doesn't make sense to remove a much less harmful product from the market while leaving the most lethal product, the cigarette, on the market. What do you feel about that? They're saying that more people are dying from cigarettes, why can't we just put the healthier alternative out there for people? What would you say to that? You can pause it if you're not done. And then the no argument, for every one adult who would quit by using an e-cigarette, there are 80 kids initiated into the use of tobacco products. What are your thoughts on that stat? So I just thought I'd throw some stuff I've heard in for both the yes and no side to this argument on if we should have in this community e-cigarettes sold at a convenience store. All right. So that is the end. Go ahead and watch the Big Vape Ed Puzzle to finish up the class. And please feel free to take a break as the sub deems appropriate. Have a great weekend, guys.